Um, Please switch off your mics. Okay, so we were discussing this choice of language in Overword, and when they communicate or talk to older people, when they communicate and talk to older people, or if they talk to their parents, you can see that at age of 63, 61, 60, 58, and 52, these are the ages which are from the, you know, age range where they are older age ranges. And if you can see that they are communicating with them in Hungarian. However, when you look at 27 and 25 years, they are communicating in both Hungarian and German language. And if you look at the younger age lot, which is 22, you'll see that they have completely shifted from Hungarian to German, and they are even communicating with their parents in German. Now, if you're communicating with the friends and workmates of the same age group, so if you look at these, 63, 61 are the age groups which are, the older ages group, and they are communicating with their friends and workmates of the same age in Hungarian. However, in 58 and 52, there is this uh, mix of Hungarian and German. However, from 27, 25, and 22, they all communicate with one another in German. Same goes for children. When you're communicating with children, you communicate or code switch, or you have the language choice, like you use both Hungarian and German in when it comes to these age groups, that is 63, 61, 58, and 52. However, when 27, 25, and 22 are communicating with children, they communicate in German. And when you are, these are the outside domains, if you see. So in these outside domains, like if you're communicating with doctor and for the government officials, and something which is related to official purposes, you can see that these groups, all these age groups, are communicating in German. This is the language shift. So when we are looking at it, after 400 years, but if you look at it after 500 and 600 years, it you can see this a shift of, you can see this G over here, you can see the shift occurring, and slowly and gradually this shift would take over even this area. And you can see that over here we have this 27, 25, and they are also shifting completely like this. By the time these age groups like 63, 61, 58, 52 are gone, they the this language, that is German, is going to take over, unless and until this there is no language maintenance, steps taken for maintaining the language. Okay, I hope it's clear so far. Then we have migrant majorities as well. Language shift may also occur due to in places where uh, we have majorities living in that place, but migrant minorities shift over there. Like for instance, in the colonial powers, like in Pakistan, or like for instance in subcontinent. So um, whenever we have such scenarios in which the dominant countries, when they come to those countries, and these colonies that they have created. So when these colonies, they in that we have subjugation, linguistic subjugation is when your language is um, when your language is taken over by another dominant language, not just because of the reason that you are in a place where where the majority are speaking another language, but also because of the different reasons. For example, political reasons and institutional reasons. So political reasons, in colonies, like Pakistan or subcontinent, you can see that you have studied history, and in history you have studied that Hindus um, uh, were learning and acquiring learning English, and that is why they were all given jobs before independence. They were all given jobs and important places, in administrations. The reason was that they knew the language. So language is very important when it comes to success. And when you know that there's a certain language which is a dominant language, a certain language which is a dominant language, and you know that affiliation, learning, using that language, it will give you some kind of benefit, whether it's economical, whether it's social, whether it's political. You will acquire that language, and there will be a shift. You will choose that language, you will use that language in a specific context, and that would lead to a language shift, and there will be a linguistic subjugation of your own language. So um, uh, so the same happened in subcontinent as well. In that context, we call English as a killer language, and that is why English is considered as a killer language in such region, because it is overcoming, or it is subjugating the language of the people, even the majorities who are living in this region. I hope it is clear. So uh, it it is not necessary that we only have even minorities can come to the area where there are majority, but still, the if the minority is powerful, so their language is uh, taken, or their language subjugates the language of the majority people who are living in that region. Okay, as I've already discussed, that the dominant language is associated with status, prestige, and social success. So if there is affiliation of a language with power, or with success, then with power or with success, then this means that it has a status, it has prestige, and it has it is associated with the success. And slowly and gradually it would take over. Just this, for instance, that if a language is official language, you know that it is an important language. So a shift from language which is not official to the official language is very obvious. For instance, everywhere where you go in Pakistan, you're asked, can you speak English? Can you take a position in any place which is good for jobs, even in schools, even in colleges, where you cannot speak in English, but still you are given a job. Obviously, this is the demand of of any job, that you should know at least little bit of English. And you might have seen these job descriptions where they say they good spoken English skills and written in English language skills, and you're good at English, because it is important, and we associate success with English in our region, and that is why it is taking over, or there is a shift which is occurring in Pakistan as well. If you not in I'll give this example later when we'll come towards language maintenance and language death and loss, but and different reasons why how you can save it. But here I'll just give this example that uh, speakers of like language in Islamabad, this shift in Islamabad and in Punjab region, it's more as compared to KPK region. And the reason is that over there people have shifted from even their even in their home domains, they have shifted. They do not speak their mother tongue, they do not speak their native language, and they have shifted from that native language to English, especially when the people who are status conscious. people with a lot of money and powerful groups. So the powerful groups would use the language of the dominant powerful group, and the language of the dominant and successful and prestigious language is uh, English, and that is why people have shifted from that language to um, English language. It's not a complete shift, but the shift is still happening. It's gradual. Okay. I hope it is clear. Any questions so far? No? Okay. Language death and language loss. Now, language loss is when you have, you have, for instance, if someone, um, let's suppose, we'll take the example of um, we'll take the example of any Pashto speaker who goes abroad, and they start speaking, any community, any Pashto community, who Pathan community who goes abroad, and they started speaking in English. There is a language shift, even the generation goes by, and now there is this third and fourth generation who are living over there, and they have forgotten about Pashto. They cannot speak Pashto. That is language loss for them. Language death is when there is not even a single speaker left, of that language, who can speak and understand that language. So if there were, God forbid, if there were no Pashto speakers left in this whole world, then we can consider it as a language death. But language loss would be if a community forgets about a certain language, though it is still there. The speakers are still present. There's this example that in 2011, British newspaper reported that Ayapaniko, an indigenous language of Mexico, was in danger by dying out, as the only two remaining fluent speakers, who were aged 75 and 69, refused to talk to each other. So these two speakers of that language, they stopped talking to one another, and when they stop talking, it means that there is no communication, and they reported it as that the language is dying. The reason is that there were only two speakers, and those two speakers were also not talking to one another. So um, when when there are no more speaker left, the language automatically dies, because language is associated with the speakers. Even if there are, you have seen that we have different transcripts available in available of the ancient times, though we can say that it's Sanskrit, or we keep on guessing that it's this language or it's that language. People try to decipher that language, people try to understand that language, but they cannot. Why? Because there is no speaker who can understand. So a language dies, and it is useless if there is no one to decipher that language, or to understand that language, or to speak that language. So the language is useless if it is not spoken. So that's how the language dies. Okay, Manx has now completely died. It's a language out, because the last native speaker, whose name was Ned, died in 1974. So there are many languages which died due to due to the reason that first there was a language shift, and then there were no speakers left of that language. So it is not necessary that only the languages which are uh, there would be shift from one language. Maybe there is some kind of epidemic after which the speakers of that language die, because nowadays we have people spread in different parts of the world speaking that language. But if, for instance, uh, there is this one tribe who are speakers of a certain language, and there's some disease which comes, and all of them dies, so automatically the language dies with them because there is no more speaker. So it can be through the language shift, or it can be through epidemic, or any other way as well. Okay, there's this example that if it is the example of the language shift. I've already given you example from Pashto in order for you to understand it properly. However, there's this Turkish example that if a Turkish community grows is in Britain, and they may shift to English over a couple of generations. This would involve the loss of language, that is the language loss for the individual and even for the community in that place. But Turkish is not under the threat of disappearing because of this shift, because language is not dead, because it will continue to be spoken in Turkey. So there are native speakers of that language. Okay. Now, any questions so far? No? Okay.
No, ma'am.
Okay. So, what are the different factors? As we've already been discussing this economic and social and political factors, that is, what we believe to be responsible for, language shift. There are multiple reasons for that. I've already discussed economic, social, and political reason in reference to English. That is, English is the language um, which would provide you economical support. I'll give you example of Chinese language uh, here in Pakistani context. That since the start of CPEC, this economic association of um, of this association of this Chinese language. It is associated with the Chinese language because uh, even we have heard that there if you were if you learn, or if you know Chinese, so you'll be given jobs, and you'll be given jobs with good salaries, and with very attractive salaries. So this is this economic shift, and we are also looking at this economic shift that is occurring, and we know that this China is emerging as a power in our uh, in our society. So we believe and we associate this economic benefit with Chinese language, and there are many people who have started acquiring Chinese language. And this there is political association as well, that how politically it's associated. So if you associated with English language, so English language is used for political powers as well, because English is the language uh, if, of superpowers. So not just one superpower, but many. So that's why we try to acquire that language. Sorry, we try to learn that language, and in order to gain power. So this is the reason which would be responsible for the language shift, and also for the speed of the shift. So for instance, if you believe that there is a very drastic change which is occurring in the economic and political and the social factors, we'll come to the social factors as well. So if you think, and if you believe that there's a very drastic change occurring from economic in the economic structure, you'd also directly go for that. You have seen how drastically this CPAC came, and how how important this Chinese language became. So uh, this can be the language. This can be one of the factors, that though it is not it is not the exact example of the shift. Here in Pakistani context, English is shifting different domains. And other reasons could be that if you have very strong affinity towards your language, then there is little chances that your language would be shifted. So if you feel, if a community feels that and they account that our language is more important, and they try not to shift from one language to another. It is very common with our in our Pushtun society and in our community, that we try to value our language a lot. Like no matter what happens, our elders would not let us speak in other languages, because we value our even in home domains, we they try not to use any other language and try to stick to Pashto. Even in Hinko speakers, if you see, there's this shift that you might have seen many Hinko speakers shifting from Hinko to Urdu. Like Hinko speakers, their parents are Hinko speakers, and they shift from Hinko to Urdu. Now their kids and even the parents are speaking Urdu in their home domain. How many of you are Hinko speakers and you speak in Urdu at your home? Do we have any speakers over here who are Hinko speakers? Parents are Hinko speakers, but they use Urdu at their home. Uh, no speaker?
Who's the speaker name?
Yes, no speaker. Okay. Okay, so then I hope you got the example. I hope you understood how it
Yes,
is.
ma'am.
Yeah, so there's this this change or shift from one language to the other, and there are multiple reasons for that, success and other reasons as well. We have other demographic reasons for that as well. Demographic reasons, the one reason is that, for instance, people are shifting or people are coming from villages to the cities, and this shift from villages to cities is leading to the language that is spoken in cities. Now here I'll give you the example of this shift occurring in the dialects. So for instance, if someone is speaking their own Pashto in their own region, in their own village, and then they are coming to the cities, and their families have shifted to the cities, and um, now they are speaking in the Pashto which is spoken over here. So there would be a time where they'll completely forget about their own dialect. This is one of the reasons in language shift as well, that people shift from one language to another due to this shift in um, due to this shift that is from the villages or the country areas to the city areas. That's the reason. Maybe it's obviously it has some association with the social needs, that is with getting jobs and better opportunities over here in the cities. There is a reason, but this is one of the reasons. This is the demographic reason. I hope you know about demographics. Demographic is anything which is related to you know uh, uh, related to the participants, related to the area in which they are living, related to the age factor. All these are responsible. I've already talked about age, that younger generations are more prone towards the changes, language shift, and as compared to the older generations, because they are stronger in their they have strong hold of their grounds and ethnic beliefs, as I've already discussed, that if our older generations, they do not let us speak in other languages because they have strong affinity with their language. Okay. Other reasons can be marriages as well. So for example, we have uh, for example, we have a shift from like there are intermarriages is, for instance, if the mother is Pashto speaker and if the father is Hinko speaker, then the possibility is that the kids are going to speak Pashto. But because mother has a lot of influence on kids. Um, that is why kids are going to speak in mother in this in the language of mother. So, or if the mother is Hinko speaker, then the kids would probably speak in Hinko, would communicate in Hinko, and will use Hinko as their language. So there is going to be a shift from their language to another language. So this is the shift which occurs. So intermarriages can also be a reason for shift in one language to um, another language. I hope it's clear. Do I need to give other examples as well, or it's clear? Okay. So, okay, good. Okay, I've already discussed this point that attitude towards a language, like your positive or negative attitude towards a language, or your affinity towards the language, if it is strong, even if it is towards the minority language, even then you'll be using that language, and you'll have affinity towards that language, and you'll be using that language. If you might have seen these Chinese politicians, they never use English. They always communicate in their own language, even though it is um, even though it is considered as English is a very English is an influential language, but still they consider their own language more positive, their own language as more important, and they have strong affinity towards their language, and they have positive attitude toward their language. That is why they consider speaking in their and giving preference to their own language. So in that scenario, the language shift is going to be either slow or is going to never happen in such cases. Okay. I hope it is clear so far.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. Now, maintenance of a language, like how can you maintain a language if there is a pressure of shift? For example, if there a the pressure is, for example, English, right? So English is pressurizing us to shift from one language to another, that is to shift from Pashto or your native language to the other language. How are we going to make it more we're going to make maintain our own languages? um, we know that social factors such as participants and settings are very important for the language choice. So in such social settings where you think that for instance home domain, or for instance if you're talking informally to your friend, even in workplace, even in schools, you can use the same language. You can use the same language, and or you can stop these intermarriages in sense that for instance if someone is abroad and they marry a, a lady who's the native speaker of English. So it's very obvious that husband and wife are communicating in English, so the kids would definitely communicate in English. So the language of you know uh, uh, one of the parents uh, own language is gone. So you can stop it if you stop intermarriages, or if you stop or if you have you can maintain the language in different domains. For instance, home, where you think that language can be maintained, and you can save that language. You can also incorporate these languages in schools and colleges on the institutional level. So for instance, if it happens it, here in Pakistan, we are affected by the language of the minority, right? We were affected by the language of the minority, because of the colonies and all that. So in such cases, institutions or law has to take part in that. uh, in it, as I've already given you the example that now in KPK, Pashto is compulsory for the students to study. So that's how we are maintaining the language. We are trying to maintain the language, and we are trying to slow down or stop the language shift. So um, it, if you are taking such steps, and such steps are taken by the government, so we can either revive the language. Revive is when your language is almost going towards the loss, or which is already shifted, and it depends on which stage that shift is. Here in Pakistan, it's not that serious of a case, but I'm just giving you the example so that you may understand what is this concept of language shift and revival. So you can have uh, you can maintain the language through that, and you can even revive the language through that. So for instance, if there is a language which is dying after language shift, and there is a lot of time has passed after language shift, and let me give you example of Hungarian. So if for instance in a Hungarian language is about to die, and the German language has already taken over, and the community of Hungarians now believe that Oberwort, people of Oberwort believe that now we have to revive our language. Our language is dying. So in order to revive that language, like let's suppose we have only like few speakers of that language left. What they can do is that they can start a a school, a preschool for the students in which they can study. They can start newspaper in that language. They can start a TV channel in that language. This is how they would be able to maintain the language, as well as they'll be able to revive the language, their own language. So this is how it is possible. There are other there's this one more way of analyzing where the language is, and how, on which stage it is, and how you can maintain, and and why the language has shifted. It was given by Howard Giles and his colleagues, and the concept is called ethno-linguistic vitality. It encompasses three important components, in which the first is that the status of the language as indicated by the attitudes towards it. So for instance, if you can if you see that uh, you know the status of the language, what is the status of the language, like do people have positive attitude towards it or negative attitude towards it, what kind of attitude towards people have towards that language, and then you try to maintain that language or revive that language. The second is the size of the group who uses the language and their distribution. So for instance, if the size of the language is a language which is endangered, or you're trying to maintain that language or revive that language, if the size of that group is very small group, limited people, then obviously it is going to be very difficult. Or if the people are scattered, then also it's going to be difficult. But you have to look at it and then decide what is that you can do. And then the third thing is the extent to which the language enjoys institutional support. So, for instance, if someone leaves Pashto, like, if, for instance, just as an example, imaginary example, that our government believes that, Pashto is not that important, and or any other language, let's suppose in Punjabi is not that important, and, they stopped um, teaching Punjabi or Sindhi, or even if it's gone from the schools, no one is speaking it. The the institutional power, if institution is believing that a language is important, let us give an example of Hinko. Like, there should be some kind of institutional steps which can be taken, which should be taken, in order to support this language maintenance. So the more the government or institutions are working for that, the more easy and the more and the more fast the language maintenance or language revival would occur. Is it clear? Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sometimes certain, as I've already discussed, all these factors in are related to language revival as well, and um, I've talked about this as well, that language revival depends on. Okay, I'm left with only 1 minute in this session. I'll try to wind it up. uh, if a language is in danger, if the community realizes it and they take step for that, then it is easy to revive a language. If it is not the community, then it becomes difficult. The attitude of the people is very important to revive a language. If there is no positive attitude and everyone considers that language not to be important, then the language will never be able to, you'll never be able to revive a language. And I guess that's it for today. Yes.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. This dimension, these are all the factors which are responsible for all the things that we have studied. I have already explained economic. I have explained political. Institutional is the power that the government has got. Demographic, I've already discussed. Attitudinal is related to the attitude. Educational, if it is implemented in schools. And socio-cultural, for example, in your society, in your culture, how much important, like for instance, our culture, Pashtun culture is very strong in keeping the language. So that is, the socio-cultural factor. I hope this is all. I've already explained it, but this was given by Spolsky. I hope it is clear to you all.